Welcome to Chris Chocolaad Live. I'm here with Stephen Alloy.
Hey, everybody.
We're going to talk about Cream. In particular, we're going to talk about a drummer, Ginger Baker.
Ginger Baker. None like him.
None like him. And if you're just joining us, if you're not joining us live, you're joining us in replay, thanks for coming and watch. We're going to talk about Ginger Baker and the band Cream. In particular, we're talking about Disraeli Gears. We'll do a little album review.
Yeah, one of my favorite, I mean, there's not a bad Cream album. There really isn't. But somehow Disraeli Gears always stands out for me. Maybe it's because I think this was probably the first Cream album I heard as a young, probably junior high, juvenile delinquent. I heard Sunshine of Your Love was on the radio. That's on this album. And so, of course, we sought out the album and saw the cover, and which you can see behind us, and we just said, I got to hear that. And oh my goodness, what a great album! What a great album!
It is a great album. Most of the albums I like, or most of the bands I end up liking, have a strong drummer, strong percussion section. Mm-hmm. And while the Cream, I didn't wasn't growing up, I didn't listen to, wasn't on my radar. It was just it's been fun. I discovered Cream later, and it was really fun researching Ginger Baker because it led me into some other drummers that he really enjoyed listening to and mentored. And so just going down the rabbit holes of what bands were they in, even what bands Ginger Baker's been in. That's been fun finding those and listening to some of the tunes that those came up with.
And thinking about Cream, it's similar in a way. We've done a couple on the Doors. And the one commonality between Cream and the Doors, there aren't a lot, but the one, I think, is that most people tend to think of both groups as really a vehicle for one particular individual, when really the style actually came from some others. In the case of Cream, I think most people think, oh, that's Eric Clapton's group. And Eric Clapton certainly is a signature part of Cream. However, it was pretty heavily managed, and some might say overmanaged, by Jack Bruce, and the sound. I guess I would make the argument, just like I've made the argument that the Doors sound is really Ray Manzarek. I would argue that the Cream sound is really Ginger Baker.
Yeah,
it really has the style and the sound that he created. That.
And I found that that gets you to the Graham Bond Organization, and how do you. From the Graham Bond Organization, why Ginger wanted to help, or why Ginger wanted to form Cream.
Exactly.
Was to highlight his drums, and so.
Well, and this, I'm glad you brought up the Graham Bond Organization, because that sort of leads into into my first question. So one of the frameworks we do here is we ask 10 questions that obviously Ginger is in no position to answer anymore.
Let's cover that real quick. So the whole idea, what we're going to do on this podcast, we're going to come up with 10 questions we'd want to ask Ginger Baker. Yeah. And the idea is kind of use the Socratic method. That means just trying to find the truth of the matter, and our way of finding that truth is often kind of funny. So we'll dive in and see what are those 10 questions we really want to ask Ginger Baker. We have some thoughts on what those 10 questions are, but the idea is we don't know where we're going with this. This is live, and so we're just going to kind of talk through it and come up with what those 10 questions are, and just kind of have a conversation.
Well, and Chris and I are improvisers. In fact, we're part of a comedy improv group. If you're ever in Omaha, look us up. We'll let us know. We'll come to some shows. So we improvise a lot of this, too. This is not a heavily scripted show.
No, we just do
maybe you thought it was really heavily scripted. No, it's not.
We really don't know what we're saying. We do a lot of research. I think both of us like watching documentaries.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I like pulling up JSTOR or the academic journals and see what's written out there, and just finding... I'm doing some deep web searches or read autobiographies. I really enjoyed watching it's actually on YouTube. There's a neat biography on Ginger Baker Beware Mr. Baker.
Beware Mr. Baker.
Is the name. And
definitely worth watching.
Because he talks about himself a whole lot in that, and I thought it was a pretty well balanced. From what I doing my due diligence, it seemed like it's a fairly from what was represented, seemed to be the truth. There's always other aspects of it, but it was kind of interesting what they had strung together. And beware Mr. Baker.
And with the questions that we ask as part of this, the 10 questions, they're more, I guess they're more like essay questions. They're more discussion questions. A lot of these questions don't really have a set answer. It's not like yes or no. Although I think if Ginger Baker were alive and in this room, we asked him some of these questions, he might answer yes, no, or perhaps an upset.
Go fuck yourself.
Right? He might say that, yes. He might say, fuck yes, or whatever. But these are more discussion type of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like what would, if you were sitting down, or if it was like Ginger Baker was if you had a beer, or maybe you were, dare I say, shooting up with Ginger Baker. Like,
you probably wouldn't talk a lot if you were shooting up with Ginger Baker, but a beer you might talk.
But what were some of those questions you would talk about? If you're Art Blakely, what kind of questions would you want? And that's where we're going for it. And hopefully we get out some new information and you find this a little bit funny and a little bit valuable.
Yes.
Why don't you use with that first question, Steve?
Well, my first question, thinking about the personnel in Cream, and talking about how it was really very heavily managed by Jack Bruce, who bass player, did most of the vocals. There were a few vocals he did not do, but by and large did the vocals as well. Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker played together in a lot of different groups. They started out in a group called Blues Incorporated. Then they went to the Bond Oranization. Then they went to Cream. Then they were going different directions for many years. Then they actually got together again for a group called BBM, which was basically Cream without Clapton. And then they did a Cream reunion, about 10 years ago or whatever, 15 years ago. So now, on the face of it, that looks like a long partnership, but the backstory is they hated each other. Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker could not get along. From what I can have read, never got along. Just did not like each other.
And such great, just really, such just brilliant musicians.
Oh yeah,
these two strong personality, brilliant musicians.
Both very talented, but just really hated each other. To the point, Ginger Baker pulled a knife on Jack Bruce once. He said, that didn't bother me so much. It's just he was kind of rude about it.
Right.
Okay. And then Ginger Baker's autobiography, which I read part of, I didn't read all of, but one part was he was talking about that when Ginger Baker moved to Africa, I'm skipping way ahead, many years later, Jack Bruce said, well, it's good that we're on different continents, but I think I'm going to call him and say he's still a little too close. So, yeah, they really did not like each other. But yet, over like 40 years, they basically worked together and created some incredible music.
Yeah,
I would ask Ginger to talk about that. Like, man, what was that like? Because I know you guys hated each other. I mean, it's clear.
Right. It almost seemed like on stage or when they were playing together, there was like this competition. It sounded like when you listen to Ginger anywhere or Jack Bruce. It's interesting. Like Jack seems a little bit more sedated, like now, and Ginger does not.
I would never, even when he was in the thick of heroin addiction, he was not what anyone would call sedated. He was pretty active.
Right. Like never in his life. Like it was always. He was always Ginger. It was just like you knew you were getting with this guy, and he was. It was all about the art for him, the art of playing drums. Yeah,
but, and maybe that would be his answer: is that that his music life wasn't his personal life, and when he was there, he was all about hitting the time, and Jack Bruce could hit the time. Okay, I don't like the guy. But he's good. Okay.
Well, it's almost
he could hit the time. We do it well together. I don't really want to talk to the guy ever off stage, but hey, we work well together. Maybe that was it.
Yeah, and you hit on something because there's a comment he makes about Jack Bruce where he's like Jack is always just doing it halfway because he talks. I think he's talking about when they were in Jack is still playing. He's not playing bass guitar. He's playing
he played
bass.
Regular. He played guitar and bass. But he played the stand-up bass.
Yeah, the stand-up bass.
Right.
And
he did that at first, then went to a guitar.
Right, and Ginger's upset, or he said he went to the guitar too soon. We had more to do with him just playing the big bass, and so it was all about the art. And Ginger just thought that his vision of the art with Jack was the right one. And of course, Jack, had a different viewpoint. He's like, I want to go to the guitar now.
Right.
But Ginger was like, no, we have more work to do with you playing bass and me on drums.
Yeah.
And so it was a deep respect for Jack, but what he's angry about with him is that you went to the guitar, which is like his vision of where he needs to be, and Ginger's like, no, that's not what my brain says. My vision's different.
Somewhere else. Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
This kind of reminds me of like that's like when you read Steve Jobs' bio, where he has this vision of the world, and he would make you like his genius was to make everyone believe in his vision. Like if you weren't in his world, then he would like convince you this is my world. And maybe that's what Ginger Baker just couldn't do. Like he had a vision of the world, but he couldn't bring in like Jack Bruce to see the same vision. And Jack has his own viewpoint for the world, and of where he should be. So why so your question is like, why are you so angry at Jack?
Well, and talk about what that was like working together. It's one thing if you do it for short term, and and you can put up with anything for a short period of time. I'm talking most of his life. I'm talking 40 years they worked together.
Right.
What was that like, man? That must
Well,
have
Cream
been...
didn't last that long, and
Cream was short, but I mean his Jack Bruce association. Cream was just a couple of years.
Yeah, and maybe part of it is like, you can only have so much of this going on.
Well, I think that was part of it.
It was like an amazing band.
Well, I think in part Eric Clapton said, he kind of looked at what was happening with Ginger Baker and said, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
I think I got other things to do, and went on to have a great career on his own, of course.
Yes. Well, and what I'd like to do is maybe right now, because we talked about the Graham Bond Organization, and YouTube will not let us play any Cream music, even because it's not licensed, but we can play.
Yet you can go on YouTube and play Cream music, but we can't play Cream music over YouTube. This is logic, right? Okay. So when you're done, don't leave now, but when you're done, go listen to this album. You can probably listen to this whole album.
It's not licensed on YouTube, so if I try to play this music, if we try to play the music, we get a strict your video's banned.
Wow.
I checked it out. I finally found the copyright stuff on YouTube because this happened to me on Halloween where I was playing some music, and some bands will let you play it and they just get the money from your channel. Other bands there's not an agreement for Cream music, I guess, with YouTube, and so it's either banned in 285 countries. So I don't know who the 286th one is that we can play. They'll show the YouTube video. But
probably South Africa. That's where Ginger.
Yeah, maybe
they're
just in South
nice.
Africa is our YouTube.
We'll go over there.
Our one audience member from South Africa.
Yeah, we may have somebody watching South Africa.
South Africa, we'll be watching. But I was just because we're talking about the Graham Bond Organization, and what I have teed up is Early in the Morning. This is it's a song from the Graham Bond Organization. So the Graham Bond Organization was who was that? That was Ginger Baker,
right.
Graham Bond, who's nominally the band lead, or he's the one in charge of putting this band together.
Titular head, as they call it.
Yeah, you got Jack Bruce. So you already have two parts of the Cream on this organization. You have Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, and then you have Dick Hestel Smith. And so you have these four folks playing in the Graham Bond Organization. And what was interesting on that documentary they brought to light was a lot of folks kind of viewed the Graham, musicians at the time, that blues musicians, rock musicians, viewed the Graham Bond Organization as the best players, the best music, the most talented musicians in the Graham Bond Organization at that time frame. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty huge statement. You got because of all the other bands that are famous.
And you think about it too, there was a huge blues movement in England at that time, and they were maybe at the beginning of that, or at the crest of that. But you had John Mayall, you had Long John Baldry, you had Elton John actually came out of that. Worked with Baldry and worked with John Mayall. So you had a lot of really talented people that came out of that, and a lot of them went into rock, and we have two of them. Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker were two of them as well. So it was really a lot of blues music coming out of England at that time. Imported from America. It was American blues, but it was played by English musicians.
Yeah, well,
they really produced some great stuff.
Right, let's hear some. That's what I was going to do. This is called Early Morning Live, and this really features Ginger Baker in the Graham Bond Organization. So I thought this would be a kind of cool tune to tee up. See if this works.
You haven't heard us play before. This is one of Ginger Baker's own numbers, called Early in the Morning, and it's based on a prison work song. So here we go.
Pause it there.
Yeah.
So you can get it, like, so...
You can tell a drummer wrote that, right? I mean, but interestingly enough, the musical part where they were all playing before the drum solo, did that sound at all like Cream to you? I mean, did you hear the Cream changes?
You hear Jack Bruce,
right? You could kind of hear... that was Cream, basically. That was a Cream sound. That's why I'd say he really kind of created it.
Yeah, well, and so, I mean, the backstory, I guess, is Graham Bond is intoxicated or a lot of the time, and so Ginger ends up being a de facto manager. Is kind of at least one account of this is he becomes the de facto manager of the Graham Bond Organization, and he's like, well, if I'm doing all this work, why don't I just start my own group? And that's how he, with the idea of coming up with Cream. So, but my question has to deal with just kind of right around that time. So here he is, he's playing in this group called the Graham Bond Organization, and it's a pretty cool sound. He wants more, though. He wants to be able to have more artistic control of what's going on. He's fighting with Jack Bruce, and like Jack Bruce is like, I was so glad to get away from Ginger, because Ginger was like, even Ginger says, I was using a lot of heroin at the time, and he's like, I think I just scared Jack all the time. And so what a crazy dynamic to have. You got, so Jack and him are fighting. Yeah. And then, but you hear from a music standpoint, what exactly, like Ginger says he wants to have more artistic control, got it. So, but what was, I guess if you listen to Cream now, is Cream what he wanted? Was that, like, I would want to know, like, if you could go back in time when he's in the Graham Bond Organization, what did he hear what was he hearing that he wasn't able to get out in the Graham Bond Organization? And was that Cream, or was it something a little different? Kind of a weird question, but...
Well, no, that's actually a great question, because I was thinking, as we were talking about this, his Ginger Baker's early musical influences, early drum influences in particular, were jazz drummers. Not unlike we talked about Charlie Watts in an earlier program, and not unlike Charlie Watts, very influenced by jazz early on, and in particular Max Roach. He heard was probably the greatest, maybe the greatest jazz drummer ever. he heard Max Roach, and it was like it clicked. It's like, wow, there's somebody else who gets it, because he kind of had this time. He would beat desks with his fingers in school and stuff, and he always had this like internal time and he heard Max Roach go, he's got it too, So so you wonder if maybe what he, and kind of thinking about Jack Bruce saying, no, you should stay on the upright bass, maybe did he want really more to explore jazz a little bit more? Cream went a different direction and, was very successful with it, but, did he kind of want to, because later on, once he was not in Cream anymore, maybe many years later, he got into sort of African jazz, and so he did kind of play jazz later.
Yeah, he did. It was that.
Maybe that's what he wanted to do. I don't know.
It's that age-old argument. Mm-hmm. What's marketable versus what you want to do as an artist, and just it'd be if you could. So I think that's my question: is what would he when he was in the Graham Bond Organization? What was that sound that he was hearing that he really wanted to do and make, or was he making the sound and was this ended up? Because I didn't quite get that from what I read. It was like he's like, well, I can manage my own band and stuff, and so was that ultimately all it was? But it seemed part of his answer, like we've been talking about, was that he heard a sound and he was like, I didn't have complete artistic control, and I wanted that, or more artistic control, not complete, but more artistic control.
Right.
And did Cream achieve that vision for him, or was that why he was so angry at Jack Bruce all the time?
Yeah,
even in Cream,
he wasn't quite getting it, maybe. And he was sort of in charge.
Yeah,
so maybe he wasn't getting it.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking of Graham Bond, I don't know if we haven't shown the picture yet.
Yeah, you want to share that?
Yeah, I don't know if we can show the picture. This is a picture of the Graham Bond Organization. If we can show it here.
Yep, here we go.
Oh, okay, there they are. That's the Graham Bond Organization. That is Ginger Baker laying on the table. That is Graham Bond cupping his head. And that is Jack Bruce looking like he wants to jam that bottle right through Ginger Baker's head. You could kind of tell, this picture really says a lot.
Even though it's like a posed picture.
Of course, that's Dick Heston Smith at the feet there. But, it's a posed photo. It's a staged, goofy photo. But, you look at that, and you almost look at that, and you can take away that Jack Bruce didn't like him that much. Really, this was not a friend of his. They didn't feel kind feelings toward him. And the feeling was mutual. So, kind of an interesting shot. And I think one of the reasons he left the Graham Bond Organization was Graham Bond, I think, who was more interested in substance abuse than music at some point. They actually became very, very popular. I mean, that was his first really big. I mean, he had been in Blues Incorporated before that, but that was really his big success. Was the Graham Bond Organization, which interestingly is not talked about a lot these days, but
no,
very influential group.
Yeah. I mean, if when you listen to artists from the time period, they're like, the Graham Bond Organization had the best musicians at the time frame. You're like, whoa, why?
Well, yeah, and in fact, in looking this up, I discovered that this, I think, was after Ginger Baker left. After they formed Cream, they were joined by a guitarist named John McLaughlin, who later became maybe the creator of fusion jazz, one of the creators. Certainly, Chick Corea would, be mad if I said he was the creator, but he was one of the creators of fusion jazz. The Mahavishnu Orchestra. He started off with the Graham Bond Organization. I mean, go figure. Right? I wouldn't have necessarily thought that, but there it was.
Yeah. So on this picture, what is this picture? What's the question you end up asking about? As I think you highlight kind of like, all right, here's this weird dynamic that's going on between Ginger Baker. I mean, obviously it's staged, but still, like you highlighted, like we got substance abuse going on. Like Graham Bond.
Well, they were all kind of into substance abuse. I think, to be fair, it wasn't just Graham Bond, but I think the thing that really caught me about that photo is obviously it's a staged, goofy shot. Everybody's laughing except Jack Bruce.
So why?
He's not thinking it's that funny. He's thinking, I actually would really like to jam this down your throat. I actually would.
So maybe the question is the Ginger Baker at this point, because Ginger Baker looks like he's just having fun with this.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're all kind of
laughing about it.
Yeah.
So what? Maybe the question is like, all right, so it looks like you guys are having kind of fun, even though like Ginger says himself, like I pulled a knife on Jack.
I don't know if this was before or after.
Before
the
or
knife
after
incident.
that happened. Like,
It would happen around that time, probably. But
yeah, when you like listening to him talk about it versus being in the moment with him. Maybe that's kind of the question. Is like, what is that? What is going on in your brain when you light up and you're so angry at Jack Bruce? It's like you have this goofy photo. You're all like, at least you're able to pull it together here. You can play together. What do you think about that question?
Well, and I think that actually, I had a question that was kind of maybe along the lines of that this question or this photo might, lead to. We've in all of our earlier or most of our earlier videotapes, we've talked about rhythm sections where we've dealt with drummers. Certainly, we've talked about rhythm sections that got along, that really worked well together. Keith Moon and John Entwistle. They were the best friends. Keith Moon had some serious disputes with Roger Daltrey and with with the rest of the Who, but he and Entwistle got along. Pete Townsend would be the rest of the Who, but he and Entwistle were great friends. Charlie Watts didn't have major disagreements, but wasn't as good a friend with the rest of the Rolling Stones. But he and Bill Wyman, great friends still. Even Wyman's no longer with the Stones, they're still great friends. They, here we got people who worked well together and really got along. Actually, were the closest in the group.
Yeah,
here we got the opposite. I mean, these guys worked well together, obviously, but no, they were not, they were anything but friends.
It's like the opposite of what a management. If you brought in Booz Allen, and you like Booz Allen, like you could use like Charlie Watts as a case study, and Booz Allen would be all proud because it's like, okay, the idea of fostering a relationship, like he would walk around to the band members, he would chit chat with folks and kind of build a camaraderie, and then when he went out to perform, like that all paid off. Like you kind of got the idea that he was building a team, and the team came together. In this case, you have a clearly toxic relationship going on.
Oh yeah.
Yet their performance, when it came down to it, they're still able, like they performed. Is it, despite of that time, right? And so it's like the opposite of what a Booz Allen type or any business book you would get today. It would be like, don't do this, right? Like, that the toxicity of that relationship.
Well, and in fairness, I don't mean to sound like I'm coming down on Jack Bruce because they weren't friends. I'm not saying it's Jack Bruce's fault. I think, in fairness, Ginger Baker was probably hard to be friends with. It was quite often not a friendly sort of guy off stage. On stage, different world.
Right. He's all about the art. It's if you're not meeting what he sees as the art, it's like wham, he's going to smack you.
Oh yeah, and in that documentary that we talked about, Beware of Mr. Baker. He says in one of the parts of the interview, he says that Eric Clapton is his best friend in the world. And then, they're talking about Eric Clapton, and Eric Clapton says, well, we got along, and we met in very rarefied environments. We'd meet in studios or on stage, and, when it got into his personal life, he said, I kind of walked away. I mean, I didn't want to get involved. I don't really know him that well.
But
I didn't really want to get involved in his personal life because I didn't think it'd be good for me. It'd be good for my life. I got my, basically saying, I use different words, but he basically said, I got my own problems. I don't didn't really want to get involved in because I knew he had a lot of problems, and he started to walk away.
I think that should be a question too on Clapton. Going back to this picture, like before we talk about Clapton too much, are you all right with the idea that maybe the question is something to do with, what is that dynamic between you and Bruce? What's the toxic relationship going on between you and Bruce at this point, and how did that affect your art? Is that the question?
Yeah, well, and I think maybe more. How did it not affect your art? Because I don't know, or maybe it was the reason they worked so well together because they were trying to outdo each other. But
there you go.
You think about it, they worked as well together as Bill Wyman and Charlie Watts, who were great friends.
this like you're saying, like you have all these folks that are working well together.
They work so well together.
Does this toxic relationship just end up fueling this competition on stage? That's like that ends up with this brilliant music because the song I was playing earlier is early in the morning. And it's the Grand Bond Organization, and it's a live take from Clute Creek. So it's the Clute Creek. It's just a live take from Clute Creek and stuff they came. And so when they're playing live, does that mean like is that what it's all about? And it's that competition on stage, and that's kind of fueling that art for them. Oh wow.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And so like what? So that's kind of the question. Then you're getting to is. Like what, despite them not being friends together, what was it? Like had they been friends, would the art not has been good?
Yeah, you wonder. I mean, maybe that's what it took.
The question.
Because you look at Ginger Baker's life, and maybe it took, antagonism and adversity and scrappiness to create the art.
I think that's the question.
You look at a guy like Charlie Watts, who is, stylistically as good a drummer as I think is Ginger Baker.
But Ginger would say no.
Ginger would say no, and some might say, but I think Charlie Watts is a darn good drummer. Yeah. But there could not be two different personalities. I mean, Charlie Watts likes to go to work and come home. I mean, he works. He lives more or less like he's a CPA or something. He's just normal kind of life.
Right.
Ginger Baker, not at all. Very, very different. Great drummers, but completely. So maybe that's, and for Charlie Watts' art, it gets disturbed if he's got too much adversity. He kind of walks away from that. Maybe he and Clapton should have worked together. That would have been a good combination. But maybe Ginger Baker needs that hostility to create. It's sad if he did, but. Maybe that's what it took, and maybe that's what it took for Jack Bruce too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they were more alike than Jack Bruce would have liked to admit. Maybe
that's also funny. Well, that kind of gets us. Let's go into question 5 then. I mean, I don't know if I get question 5 or
I don't know.
I'll take where you're kind of going with that.
I got another one if you don't.
I
have so many questions.
You have so many questions. I got lots of questions too. Such
like, did he hate the name Ginger?
I think that we can. Yeah, we got to ask that question. Yeah, his name is what? Patrick.
Peter Edward Baker.
Peter
Edward Baker. If I said we're here to talk about Peter Edward Baker, nobody would click on this.
Not too many people know who Ginger Baker is. Even fewer people would know who. Right.
Ginger Baker. No, that one I'll click on. Yeah.
Well, let's go down that. You brought up Clapton, so right after the Grand Bond Organization, I guess he knows Clapton at this point, and he
Clapton had been around with. He had worked with John Mayall, I think, and then he had, of course, with the Yardbirds, which was another British blues-oriented group. So, I mean, Clapton was getting well known around the same time with different groups, not with these guys.
Yeah, well, and so he decides the Grand Bond. So my gist of the situation is like he's in the Grand Bond Organization. He knows of Clapton, but he's like, I wanted to form my own band because I have more artistic control. So I'm doing a lot of the management anyway. And so he formed. So he's got Clapton, and Clapton's like, hey, let's bring in Bruce. Which I think is might be another question of just digging in on a little bit of that, but let's talk about just Clapton. So he runs into Clapton. What is it that he mentions that he likes time. He just thinks he's a great musician as part of he wants to work with, but he doesn't have the Clapton and him seem to get along and they play well together. Yeah. So what is it about Clapton that allows him to Clapton obviously has a strong personality. He's a strong artist. Yeah. And he's not in fights with Ginger Baker. What is different? What is that thing because we were just talking about how the antagonism with Bruce just let that section, fueled part of this creative art. Maybe with Clapton, what's the opposite side of this? What is it about Clapton that you actually got together with? Is it because like I think it was a story you're talking about like Clapton says like I can only get so close to him,
right,
and then I had to back off.
Yeah.
Like
he knew there was a lot of problems in there. He said, it's not going to be good for me. I can't. I got to worry. I got my own problems in the sense.
I just stay sober, and if I get too close to him,
I can't do that.
Which is almost. I didn't take that as him not being a good friend. It was almost this kind of self-reflection on.
Right. Yeah.
I wish I could have been a better friend, but for my own self-preservation, I couldn't be as good a friend as like maybe I had wanted to be.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think Clapton, all things being equal, would have wanted to be a better friend, but he got enough of a view that he said, this is not going to be good for me long term to get involved in this. I'm just
and that was kind of
do it.
and what I think was missing in the documentary is really what is it about Clapton that Ginger actually likes. Like he certainly respects him as a musician.
Yeah.
And Clapton was there for him, but what is it about Clapton that allows him to get along with in a work relationship and apparently in a personal relationship, like they can be personal friends, where Jack Bruce was just like there, and a lot of people can't get along with Ginger Baker. But Clapton seems to have this ability.
Clapton could.
Yeah. And was it just because he had deep respect for Clapton, and for some reason Baker just didn't have that respect for Bruce, even though Bruce was really good?
Well, maybe it's because Clapton drew that line and said, we're going to get along, we're going to work together fine, but you know what? That's it. That's all we're going to have. I'm not going to be, coming to your house all the time. I'm not going to, whatever. You got these crazy adventures. I'm not going to do them. But, we're going to work together. We're going to get along great. And when work's over, we're going to go different places. Maybe that's why it worked so well.
He set boundaries that he stuck to, and that allowed the relationship to go on. Wow, that might be a...
That might be it.
That might be a relationship video.
Booz Allen would like that.
Yeah, they would be. Like set healthy boundaries, and you'll have a good relationship.
Yeah.
So your argument. So the question. So that would be my question to Baker. What was it about Clapton that allowed you to have why is he your best friend? It's kind of a hard question to ask. But I think really just what is it different? Why is Clapton different than working with Bruce? Like one guy you're pulling knives on, the other guy you're like, he's my best friend.
Yeah.
And you at some level you had to respect both these guys because they're in the band that he's like out. He's talking to Clapton.
And really, when you make a list of great rock guitarists, Clapton's near the top or at the top. When you make a list of great rock bassists, Jack Bruce is near the top or at the top.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's that, but yeah, completely different, personality, personal relationships.
And it could just be small things that just drove each other nuts, I suppose. But so that was my question. I think that's the question, and then those are to question 6.
Well, there's one more thought on your question here. When Cream only was a group for 2 years, basically. Little 2 and a fraction, and it basically split when Clapton ran across. In a sense, Clapton was the rising star when Cream started, and then there was another rising star a couple of years later, Steve Winwood, little Stevie Winwood, Stevie Winwood they called him at that time, who Clapton had noticed from, I believe, the Spencer Davis group. Winwood had been in, and said, "Hey, I'd like to form another group with him." And he said, "I can, like Jack Bruce, got along with Jack Bruce just fine." But he figured it'd be those 3, and maybe they'd find a drummer. He met with Steve Winwood one day at his house, and Ginger Baker showed up. Said, "All right, hey, we gonna practice?" So it's like, all right. So that was Blind Faith. That became Blind Faith there. And actually, I take that back. He took Rick Gretsch as a bassist with Blind Faith. He did not take Jack Bruce. Maybe because he thought if he took Bruce, he would get Ginger Baker. But he got Ginger Baker anyway, so that became Blind Faith, which outstanding group, one album group, but oh boy, what a great album. So, but anyway, that's not my question. My question again, we're talking a lot about Ginger Baker's personality, which is it's not his music, but it's hard to ignore. And so I got another one on personality, and maybe in discussing this question we can kind of explain some of it. You look at rock drummers, or really drummers, any drummers, and drummers tend to fall. There's sort of a stigmatism, or whatever. There's a stereotype, I guess I would say, that drummers are kind of wild men, and that's not always true. But I think drummers do kind of fall. You look and you can see kind of two different categories of drummers. There are kind of the nice guy drummers, and then there are the wild man drummers who are wild, either just wild stylistically, or they have wild lifestyles, or they're just nasty people, whatever. And I made a very small, very partial list here, but some of the nice guy drummers, Dave Grohl, Nirvana, and later Foo Fighters. Charlie Watts, I'd say, is one of the nice guy drummers. Or Ringo Starr, probably. I mean, he's a little wild, maybe, but he's probably one of the nice guy drummers. Max Roach, his hero, Ginger Baker's hero, probably one of the nice guy drummers as well. And I would say Stuart Copeland from the Police. Now, Sting might disagree, but I would call Stuart Copeland probably one of the nice guy drummers. They're skilled. They're all those guys are great, but they're kind of more friendly. I don't know. They're more normal. Now, there are, of course, a lot of wild man drummers. Ginger Baker is prominent among that group. Keith Moon. We did a show on Keith Moon, not too long ago, and Keith Moon was a little friendlier maybe than Ginger Baker, but a wild man nonetheless. John Bonham, Led Zeppelin, no arguing there. Gene Krupa, certainly. Travis Barker of Blink-182. In fact, I saw them in concert last year, and he's still a wild man, in fact. So Neil Peart from Rush, another wild man drummer. Alex Van Halen, and Buddy Rich, who was an early influence, or at least was a stylistic influence to some extent on Ginger Baker, who maybe not a wild man like stylistically or in life, but just not a very pleasant guy from all accounts. So I guess the question in there is what leads to that stereotype that drummers are unpleasant, they're unruly, and I don't know. I think it's up for discussion, but I read an article that might have an answer, and it kind of relates to something that Ginger Baker said in the documentary. He was talking about that he always had it, and the interviewer said, "Had what?" And Ginger Baker, it was like, "That's a stupid. How stupid are you?" He said, "Time."
Yeah.
Just like, come on. You didn't know that's what I meant? And no, nobody knew. Nobody knew what he meant, but that is what he meant. Right. But he always had this internal time that he would keep with the drums. And I think this article that I read, and kind of made sense. He said that some drummers have a great internal sense of time, and some have less. Some are just skilled. They develop one, but some they have a really strong natural sense of time. When they're playing, it's on. They're it. When they're not playing, they're out in the world, and the world doesn't have the sense of. The world's out of sync. Yeah. So they can't handle that as well. Because things don't move on their time. It's not. There's a different internal rhythm to the world than is in your head. So maybe that explains it. I don't know. What do you I mean, actually, Chris, you're a drummer. What do you think? I mean, you're maybe one of the nice guy drummers too, I would say. But what do you think?
Well, you haven't dated me.
Well, I haven't. No, I know that's true. I might get an argument on that.
Get an argument with that. You might get an argument with some people. Well, on that note, like you talked about Nirvana, and I think on time, and I remember there's a Netflix. It's on Netflix. There's a documentary called Sound City, and it's a documentary about a sound studio in L.A. And where Fleetwood Mac recorded out of there, and just a lot of different people. The drums just sound amazing out of Sound City. And Dave Grohl is in there playing with Nirvana, and they talk about how he's in there. Nirvana, I think, ends up saving, like, they had some trouble in the 80s because drum machines are coming out and people aren't using the studio as much.
Yeah.
They were going all digital. Mm-hmm. Nirvana comes into play, and they talk about how I think it was I'm trying to remember Teen Spirit. They're playing a song and it keeps going faster. Like they're in the studio and it's just like the timing is going faster and faster. Mm-hmm. And so the producer said asked them to hey, how about wearing a basically put a metronome, put a timing track and listen to a timing track as you're playing. And as a drummer, it was interesting. He was like, man, that producer was such, I just wanted to kill him right then as being a drummer because the drummer's all about timing, like you said, and now someone's telling me I don't have timing.
Right.
And so just kind of that reaction, I mean, it ends up in kind of the end of the way that story ends is Nirvana's like they in one or two takes, bam, that song is recorded because all of a sudden the song's not speeding up anymore. And was interested in listening, and they said, we took this back. We listened to the tape in the apartment afterwards, and to me it sounded like it was slowing down. And so this idea of having a natural timing where your clock is the universe clock, and having that, does that just make you if you believe that, and like Ginger Baker certainly, from all the stuff you read in the interviews, he believes like it's divine intervention. He believes he has a internal clock that was divine given
to him. And he should set the clock. I mean, that's
Yes.
Yeah.
And so does that make you like King Henry? Like okay, if you're king because God told you you're king versus you're actually just there to serve the people and it was luck. Right? How does that change your perspective?
Born into the right family.
Yeah, you're born in the U.S. You're very lucky versus it's divine intervention. Like if you start believing like it's like the hand of the divine has appointed you. Wow, what a ego trip that would give you, and potentially like if you don't check that somehow, if you don't have somebody to check that, then yes, I think you would ultimately you become an a-hole. You know what I mean? Like how does that how do you not become an a-hole? Because like the whole band relies on me, and it's because God appointed me to keep time for you.
Yeah, and usually statements like that are exactly the moment bands break up. You look historically, other than the Yoko Ono incident, that's usually what has broken bands up, is someone gets that, you guys need me.
Yeah.
Complex, and no, we don't.
Yeah, no. I mean, so if a drummer's feeling like, or if you feel like I don't, and what are they going to do without me, type of thing. So I think that would be kind of like on that. I think Ginger Baker. Maybe the question there is if you're bad, I mean, he kind of talks that he believes it's divine intervention. I would just like to dig into that a little bit more, and like. Kind of said this. I mean, do you don't think you can learn timing? Like really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, some of these drummers that are, I guess I'd have to say, probably more on the nice guy side, really did learn drumming. I mean, they weren't maybe natural drummers. They picked it up, they studied it, and they became drummers.
Yeah, it's like nature versus nurture. So some people can throw a baseball very young and know how to do it. Other people have to train up to do it. And so do you end up with the same kind of thing where if you took to it early versus having to work for it, does that just change your personality? And where's so
and the whole his thinking that this was a divine gift, there's really not, I never saw anything that indicated he had any particular religious belief of any sort.
That might be the question.
So,
all right, dude.
If you have, I mean, if you're not doing this to some, because you could have the belief, we're all, ordained to do something.
Right.
But I never got the impression that he really had that sort of belief, that maybe he was picked. And again, this is kind of what breaks bands up when somebody gets that view. It's like, I I don't necessarily even have a faith, but I was picked by God to lead you. It's like, yeah, no, you weren't.
Right. Yeah.
Wait a second, this is a problem.
Well, I mean, on that kind of note, is like I think it was somebody else was like, when the Holy Spirit shows up and like you have a live audience, and then when the result is something is a result of the Holy Spirit showing up. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what is, maybe that's the question, is like Ginger explained. It would be just kind of interested in what is his life philosophy, or what does he believe the supernatural is? Like, if you're pointed, like King Henry had a conversation with himself, right, on like how he got to like be divine intervention, and now I can kill all my wives. So Ginger kind of like in that role, what was his like thought process in his relationship with like if he believes that drummers are like he's naturally appointed timing, what is his
right? Well, and the implication is that he was picked, and that these other guys were not naturally ordained to do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Other than to listen to him. And, right. And it's one thing if you have a belief that, okay, I was given this gift of time, and you were given this gift of something else, writing lyrics, and you were given whatever. But no, I don't get the impression that he broadened it beyond the narrow scope of I was picked.
Right. I was picked. Yeah, it would be fun just to go on a tangent with him, like just kind of talk about this Holy Spirit, like kind of talk us through your worldview on God and how does he pick drummers.
Well, he's probably brought up C of E like so many others in England, so probably had some of that in the background, but I saw no reason to think that he followed it.
He didn't follow it, but yet he's appointed. So like how do you resolve that disconnect, I guess, is kind of or would be my question.
Yeah.
And resolve this for me. Like, how do you go from not believing yet this entity has appointed you as
somebody that I'm not even really sure I believe in picked me.
Right.
It's like, wait a second.
And this is why I don't like these other people.
I'm a little lost.
Help resolve this, because that seems like So maybe in his mind he has a way to resolve that, and that'd be kind of the question.
Yeah.
Good. Are we on? I think it was question 6. We're on.
I think so.
I think it goes over to you.
So.
I think that was my question, but
we are zipping along.
We are.
My gosh.
Zip.
Can you feel the wind, the breeze as we are zipping along? So is this mine now?
It is.
It is. Okay. Well, all right. Speaking of, we had touched on his move to Africa, which he did much later. Did that, I want to say started in the late 70s. So it was after Blind Faith, after Ginger Baker's Air Force. He, I guess, had always been interested in African music, and actually went to Africa. So he's there, and it's a very, he played some very interesting music and did fairly well there. Created some nice albums from there, but I can't help but wonder, particularly in looking at the documentary. Was there a time where when he was there, it's just completely different set of circumstances from what he'd been used to, completely different culture, completely different political situation, much less. He was a huge celebrity in England. He was not really a huge celebrity there. Was there a time, and he eventually economically did pretty well down there, but there was a time where he wasn't doing that well economically down there either. When he was on the whole Africa thing, was there ever a moment where he said, "What have I done? Why am I here? What is this? Why am I doing this?"
Well, I think some of it seemed to be like I think that's a good question. It's like question is, I think when he was getting shot at and running from his studio.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, there was like a revolution going on. Yeah. This was like
he leaves,
tough times,
but he seems to repeat that pattern, and so he's like,
yeah,
he has such a strong artistic vision. It's like he was talking to both he was rocking with the the counterculture, and he was playing polo with the culture, and he didn't see a problem with it because in his mind it seemed like, I'm here for art. I don't care about the politics.
And think about it.
Vita Kuti was like, dude, you got to care about the politics.
Well, yeah, and think about it. He's in an apartheid country, and he's playing at the polo club, and he wonders why when he goes back to the jazz club, people are thinking, what are you doing?
What's
Who are
up?
you?
Yeah.
And people at the polo club probably thought, who are you too, for that matter? But, very different. And he just thought, well, no, I maybe, again, he thought he was divinely ordained to do both.
This wasn't in South Africa. This was Nigeria.
Oh, he's in Nigeria.
Nigeria. He goes to South Africa.
He's South Africa later.
That's right.
So this wasn't an apartheid, but it was still,
colonial.
Nigeria was post-colonial at that point.
Colonial
but,
trappings.
not many years post-colonial, probably a decade, 15 years or so post-colonial at that time. So there was still a lot of memory.
He seemed to love it there. It's like it drove his hunger for playing music, like not having, like kind of, it seems like he has this pattern of acquiring and doing really well, gets a lot of money, and then going back to not having much and having to rebuild it. And was it that rebuild part that drives him, which I think goes to your question, is like, does he ultimately just like the feeling of like, why am I here? Because that drives that drives his vision. Mm-hmm. We have a visitor.
Okay. Oh yeah. Let's make the cat a YouTube star.
Yes.
There we go.
And so,
not that we are YouTube stars, but
no. So did he think that, or was he? I think you could ask him. Did he do that? And another way, maybe, to ask the question, was that part of what drove you as an artist? Like, you needed the hunger to do your art, and so did you? Like his third wife was saying that I couldn't. I went through a couple of these, like 4 times. Right. He brought me through this, and then the last one I was like, I'm not interested in this.
Yeah, I'm not making the strip anymore. It's like, bye.
See, right. And so like
that's it. We're done.
And your question is like, does he see that ever? Does he ever see the like, hey, why am I here? Why are people shooting at me? And it doesn't seem like it clicks. Like, it's just like he is just so focused on the art.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of relates to, in some ways it's similar to the question we had on his relationship with Jack Bruce, that is it that that adversity, does he need that adversity in his life constantly? Constant adversity, which I could explain why a lot of people found him hard to be around. People like that generally are thought to be hard to be around, but did he need that constant adversity to did he feel like that was normal, and did he need that to create the music? I don't know. Maybe he did.
And so, like, you can ask this even at his time in Cream. Mm-hmm. Did you need to break up Cream? As you're breaking up Cream, you're going on to find your next venture. Did that ever click with you that why am I doing this? And I mean, at the face of it seemed like he was like, no, I wanted to do something else. I wanted to kind of start from scratch again.
Yeah. And
redo it. Where other bands, like we had talked about the Cars, they were happy to, for a long time, Birch Octect, they stuck around for a long time. And,
and you look at, with a few exceptions, he did produce some albums that were wildly different from the Cars, but you basically you could trace Rick Ocasek's sound through even his post-Cars work.
Yeah.
With Weezer, producing the Weezer albums. You listen to Weezer, it's like Weezer's a 90s Cars, really, if you think about it. There's a lot of Cars sound in those, the Green and the Blue album from Weezer. But Ginger Baker, very, very different sounds. Even Ginger Baker's Air Force, right after Blind Faith, still a very different. He's kind of moving more toward, it had some of the elements, but he's kind of moving more toward a jazz orientation at that point. And certainly with the African music, it's completely different from Cream.
Well, let's go back. I know we were talking about, like, okay, why is he in Africa? And so the question is why are you in Africa? And did you think to yourself ever?
Did you ever think, what am I doing?
What am I doing?
What's up with this?
And we have right behind us, like before, like he's in Africa. He talks. There's that moment he's talking to Phil Seaman. I guess like Phil Seaman's shooting up on heroin, and he drops the needle.
That's when he met Phil Seaman.
Phil Seaman. And,
said, "Here, come with me," and shoots up. Right.
Yeah, and they drop the needle on some African drums, and that really inspires. Not only inspiring Phil Seaman, it inspires Ginger Baker, and they and coming up, he really likes that sound, and that's what he brings forward. And so the first Cream's first album is Fresh Cream, and the album we have behind us is their second album. It's the Disraeli Gear.
Disraeli Gears, yeah.
And it's a very psychedelic.
One of the great titles, I think, of all rock albums. Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about it a little bit. So the title is off a British Prime Minister?
Yeah, there was British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli in the 1800s. And why Disraeli Gears? I don't know. Maybe that was, it might be something simple like that was the name of a company that made, engine gears. And it was run by a relative of Benjamin Disraeli. It was Disraeli Gears.
I did not
and they actually saw a wheel that said Disraeli Gears. Hey, that's
a
funny.
good rabbit hole for us to dig out. Why
or maybe they just two random words. So he said, give me a word, Disraeli. Give me a word, Gears. All right, put them together. Disraeli Gears. There we go.
Well,
don't know.
Well, this cover is very psychedelic, and the Fresh Cream. Fresh Cream has a lot of the. Has a great sound too. I mean, all of these albums is featuring Ginger Baker, and he's bringing that African sound that he heard in Phil Seaman's office out in the music more. We kind of heard it a little bit on that Graham Bond Oranization solo that we just played a few minutes ago. And so on this album, I think one of my questions has to do with the idea of psych music, and so the people talk about psych music. You have at this time frame, a lot of times psych music, they talk about, if you talk about Jimi Hendrix and what he's doing with the guitar, you have distortion, you have time distortion, changing up beats, the idea that you're trying to recreate some sort of LSD effect, like the feeling that you get when you drop acid, you make music that gives you that feeling, and that's in some ways what you get the psych genre, right? And so on this album, I mean, there's certainly time switches. But my question would be, as Ginger's playing, and I mean, he's dropping acid during this time frame. But is he trying to go? Is he trying to do that? Like it seemed like it seemed more that he was going for this African sound beat, and less trying to go for like what Hendrix, like in Purple Haze. He's going for a very specific. He's going for a psych sound, if you will. He's going for hey, this is kind of what dropping acid makes me feel like. As I listen to just this album, like there's not a song on here I'm like, oh, that's. I mean, I love all the songs. You got, I mean, on side one you got Strange Brew, Sunshine of Your Love. All great songs. There's timing switches going on. It highlights the drums amazingly. I don't find that hey, this thing is like is this a nothing like
consciously
Purple Haze,
psychedelic,
like consciously psychedelic. I love the music. I love the cover. This cover is amazing.
Great. But I would agree with that. I think it's not. And there were some very consciously psychedelic groups at that time. Jimi Hendrix Experience, Big Brother and the Holding Company, and Electric Prunes. I mean, there were quite a few.
Right.
Not including Cream, I would say. Was there music? Maybe it bordered on that occasionally, but I think they were much more interested in the. If you want to think of it as African, but it probably is rooted in African music, but you think of it maybe more in terms of jazz, is the time changes. They were one of the few groups at that time that was doing this. That would, because most groups it was 4/4, and you had the old cliche 3 chords and the truth, whatever, and they were all 4/4 time, and every song sounded the same. Well, these didn't sound the same. No, these sounded different, and they would change the time signature, and a lot of that was of course driven by the drums, driven by Ginger Baker. So Yeah, no, I think they were much more interested in that and exploring that within the context of rock than they were thinking, oh, let's create some psychedelic stuff. Because two reasons. I think that was more musically interesting to them, and number two, they were already, Ginger and, a lot of the others were already pretty substance abused, and I don't think they needed to feel any. they were already out there, so
right. I mean, they're dropping.
I don't think they needed it anymore.
It's like Ginger says, like heroin gave him the confidence to play almost like because I wasn't afraid to get out there and just and play this African sound,
and too, this kind of question kind of reminds me of something that Ginger Baker said in the interview, and then something we were talking a little bit about earlier, that he really felt slighted because he had created a lot of these signature sounds for Cream, and he said that he made less money off of Cream than either of the other two.
Right, and they kind of explain that because, like, if I guess the way the system's set up is if you're, if you write the song or if you're vocals, you get one set of royalties. If you're, you get songwriting. So he apparently wasn't given songwriting royalties, even though he really he really did write some of the music, or at least changed some of the music. Should be maybe accredited, composer on a lot of these songs, where he added a different time signature to the opening or to the chorus part. He gets accompaniment credit, which I guess doesn't give you royalties.
Right. He made money, performing and being part of Cream, but he didn't get the songwriting credit.
Right.
Because that went to Jack Bruce or went to, whoever. Went to Clapton, I think, wrote a lot of the songs as well. So I think there was that. I think he did create a lot of this sound that maybe wasn't credited for, and I think another thing that he is not credited for, I personally think he created, in rock at least, the drum solo. There were drum solos in jazz that obviously long before his time, Gene Krupa, like that. But as far as rock, most people trace that back to Iron Butterfly, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. No, it actually goes back to Ginger Baker.
Yeah, Ginger Baker.
Before we get this, before In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, so it's Ginger Baker.
I think that leads into another question. I think so. I guess my question ends off being just, what was sort of your psych attitude as you're making this album? I love the cover. The cover's amazing. There's definitely time switches. I like the music is super groovy. There's we were talking about this album. There's not really a bad song. There's not a bad song on this album.
No, and there's not a bad Cream album.
Yeah,
I mean, I defy anyone to hold up a Cream album and say this album's lousy. No, they're all really good.
They're all good. I like the first two the best. Fresh Cream and this one
give Wheels of Fire.
Wheels of Fire.
Wheel of Fire is pretty good. Pretty good. White Room.
That's true. I give
Badge, I think, is on that one. Give it another listen.
So Wheels of Fire. So those three, the first three. Yeah,
there were only four, right? They did a live goodbye album, so that was it.
Just as they're making this album, it definitely has a super psych kind of cover. The question for me is what was what going and making it just end up being a cool cover that matched the times, and that's how they came up with, or were you going for a psych sound? From what background I could find, he was really from a drumming perspective, he was going for a more of a African. He was just pushing his African beat that he had in his head that he wanted to get out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the cover was more, hey, this will sell. I think the Polydor Records came up with something that would look psychedelic in the store and would attract the audience, which obviously it worked because we're walking through this record store and I got to hear that.
Great backdrop.
That looks like a cool. Because I like the song on the radio, "Sunshine of Your Love," and I saw this album. I was like, wow, that looks cool. So it worked, right? I mean, Polydor, they knew what they were doing.
It did work. It absolutely worked.
Right? They figured it out.
Yeah, and I guess a big part of the question would be how much did you get into making the covers? When you talk to the Doors, the Doors were very heavily involved in making their own covers. There was this just more of the how involved did Ginger get into making covers?
Yeah.
But the drum solo, So I think that's my question 7, which would lead into question 8, which is yours.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you want to talk about the drum solo. That's kind of what we were getting into a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean the drum solo that he does, he does a drum solo on Fresh Cream. Yeah, Toad is the name of the song. I was spaced out the name, but I called it back just in time. And I really think and I'm only an amateur rock historian, but I think that is the first rock drum solo ever. And actually, if you hear the one that he did with the Grand Bond Organization, that had a drum solo. Right. That was even before Fresh Cream. So maybe that was the first one. But certainly, I think we can trace it back to Ginger Baker somewhere.
Yeah.
And it became a thing for a period of time, and then it didn't. Kind of went out of rock after a time. But in the '60s, it was quite a thing to do at least some sort of drum solo. They weren't all quite as long as the Inagata DeVito one, but some sort of solo. And it's not. And his drum solo was. It was almost not to. I mean, this might sound cliche or tautological, but his drum solo was musical. Yeah. I mean, if you heard that one that we played here, there were notes in the drum solo. It wasn't just like percussion. A lot of the drum solos were just like, okay, you bass drum and you do the hi-hat and okay, yeah.
Well, he's hitting a lot of different drums.
It was musical. There were notes. I mean, it was like, man, this is something. This is good.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna follow up. I think so. I mean, does Ginger Baker, like as he was doing it, did he realize? It seemed like he was like used to jazz, where you took turns doing solos, and he brings us into kind of rock. So what's the drum solo question?
Oh well, I didn't really have a drum solo question. I just kind of want to throw that out, unless maybe that could count as one of my questions.
The drum. Well, I mean, maybe I take here's kind of where I would take. And then we can throw it back to you, like on the drum solo. That ends up like some people say that he's the father of if you will of heavy metal. And kind of is because it's drum solo, and you end up with like some of the heavy metal guys. I think if you crazy long drum solos.
If you did a genealogical tree, a family tree of heavy metal drumming, you would find Ginger Baker at the top. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, they're different.
But he has
but they started back with him. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so somebody says this to him. It's like, you're the father of heavy metal. And he's like, we should have aborted it. Right. And he's like, because he seems like he's not really enthused with heavy metal drummers. And so my question would be, all right, the new Tool album came out, and I love the drumming on that album. I mean, it's just there's some solid. I mean, like you said, it's not. They have it mic'd up so you can really hear the notes of the drums playing. So you can hear the you can hear the warmth of the tom toms and the cymbals all mic'd up. Like, would he like Tool? I mean, it was kind of my question. It's a simple question, but he seemed to like disparage every heavy metal drummer. I'm gonna put Tool into heavy metal. You could put it in a different group, I guess. But would he? Are there modern day drummers, and I'll point to Tool, that he would be like, yeah, these guys are doing something that's respectable and is good, like from a drumming perspective. That would be my question on from the drum solo, because he made the comment of we should have aborted heavy metal, but I mean, there's some good drummers out there that are playing some amazing music. Would he give some credit out to a band like Tool?
Well, and I would even go a step further. I would say not only is he the father of heavy metal drumming, but he is at least one of the ancestors of punk rock drumming as well. Because in heavy metal, I think is a lot clearer. That's maybe a direct line. He's maybe an uncle of punk drumming, if you will. But I'm thinking, and the definition of heavy metal has changed over the years. My daughter keeps reminding me how much it's changed, because heavy metal when I was a kid was like Black Sabbath and Don't Fear the Reaper. I mean, that was considered heavy metal back then.
Yeah, you're talking about crew. Like where
now
where
it's a whole different
definition.
But
Is
if,
it
but,
Metallica?
but if you look at heavy
Tool?
metal in like the early '70s, thinking Black Sabbath, I challenge you: listen to Iron Man and tell me if you can't hear
guys, right.
Ginger Baker in the background there. He's not playing on that, obviously. That's Black Sabbath playing, but if you can't hear the Ginger Baker influence in there, listen again. Turn the treble down. You'll hear it.
I was just showing you right heap. I think you're right heap's a
You're right, Heap. Yeah.
solid,
Oh yeah. Another one.
heavy band. I like the drumming on there. They had a couple different drummers, but the original drummer I really like on that too. So that's kind of my
And I would say, with punk drumming, you get less of the time changes with punk drumming than you got with Ginger Baker, but some of the surprises. I'm thinking in terms of Green Day, for example. Ginger Baker was great with like changing the drumming style. He'd be very soft and then boom in. Well, I mean that's Trey Cool's whole life. That's what he does. that's his move with Green Day. Subtle or no drumming, and then suddenly in very hard. He learned that somewhere, and I think I know
Ginger
where.
Baker's
I think it's where he learned it.
They came from Ginger Baker.
Yeah.
So I'll take that. That means I got a question. Whatever that was, question. Maybe there was question 9. Back over to you.
Oh, okay, yeah. And we're talking about jazz a little bit, and again, I think Ginger Baker probably wanted to play more jazz. Eventually, did play more jazz. In fact, he was in a group, the Ginger Baker Trio, which sounds like a jazz group, right? And it basically was primarily a jazz group. He was in there with really one of the great jazz bassists of all time, Charlie Hayden. Who I had the pleasure of seeing Charlie Hayden with. He played with Keith Jarrett. He played also with Ornette Coleman. I didn't see him with Ornette Coleman, but I saw Keith Jarrett live one time. I saw Charlie Hayden there. He's been just a stellar jazz bassist. So I guess I would, if I had Ginger and he was awake and not in a relatively good mood, I'd want him to talk about what was it like. I mean, 'cause he didn't get a chance to work with some of the older jazz guys that he had listened to that were his influence when he was young. They were dead, or they were not available, or they were drummers and he couldn't be a drummer. Two drummers. But here you've got really kind of the next generation of those guys in Charlie Hayden, who was just outstanding. What was that like? Talk about working with Charlie Hayden, because that's sort of like the torch being passed. It was the jazz torch was passed to Charlie Hayden, and now you're sitting in a band with him. What was that like? Must have been good. It was a short-lived band, but that must have been something.
So how much did you like working with Charlie Hayden?
Yeah. What was it like to work with somebody who is really kind of in the line of succession of your mentors? I mean, these are guys that you were listening to when you were a kid, and he's played with some of these guys that you were listening to when you were a kid. He was rhythm section with Art Blakely, and he was rhythm section with I want to say he was rhythm section with Max Roach for a while, maybe. I don't know. I think he was. This is almost like playing with those guys.
Yeah, right. And I think he brings up there's this one statement he makes. He's like what makes him happy in life, and he's like Max Roach, Art Blakely, Elvin Jones, and Phil Seaman all consider me friends, and there's nothing better than that. And that to him was like that is the best thing in the entire world. And so I think that's a great question. Just like, what was it like playing with some of these folks?
Is that where you wanted to get? I mean, because this is not possible on Earth to play with these guys anymore, but this is maybe the closest thing. Yeah, you're playing with Charlie Hayden now, who has played with them, so maybe that works.
Maybe that's where he I think that's a good question. I think because in the documentary it kind of focused a lot on his quirky personality, but when he was for these folks he really admired, it didn't really go into depth on what his relationship was like with them, and it's just that he really liked it. And it would be fun just to see him play with these guys or really rap with them, like when he's like, what was it like when him rapping with folks he kind of views as also God appointed and doing stuff.
Well, and the one in the documentary, it really just mentioned their names and kind of assumed that anyone watching the documentary knew them, and we did, but I don't know if everybody does. I think it probably would have been good if they could add 10 minutes to the documentary and go back and play a little bit from these guys, and you could see what he picked up maybe from Max Roach. You could see what he picked up maybe Art Blakey.
Yeah, like so that kind of leads us into we're on the last question.
There's
still so much to talk about.
You thought we'd never get there.
And so we got on to the question about Tool, and I liked that.
It was a very functional question.
Yeah,
very utilitarian. Very useful. Got to get the right question for the job.
So what should question 10? What should the last question be? Scamper is helping me come up with the last question.
What should the last question be?
I know it's like, what's the favorite song on Disraeli Gears? I think that might be one that I could just be one to throw out there. I ask Steve that question. What's your favorite?
My favorite song, I favor side 2 over side 1. Nothing wrong with side 1. I just like side 2 a little better. And my favorite song on that album has got to be "Tales of Brave Ulysses." I think it's a stunning achievement for any group at any time. It's just a great song.
Cool.
And a lot of drum changes, time signatures, and you really hear. I just was mentioning how he's not only the father of heavy metal drumming, the father of punk drumming as well. You can hear when he goes from the hi-hat in the different times when he goes into the 4/4. If Trey Cool wasn't listening to that, he picked it up somewhere. It's exactly the same move. So it's just a great song.
It's fun. I think I like Strange Brew. I think it's just a cool song up front. I mean, it's easy. #1 song on the album. I like just like you can put Disraeli Gears on and play the whole album through. If you haven't heard this album, pull it up on your Apple iTunes, get it up on Siri, and then go buy the vinyl and listen to this thing. It's good.
I can tell you just a quick note on Strange Brew. I got to tell you that might be my second favorite song on the album too, because I can still remember I don't know how old I was, but I was junior high-ish when this came out, and for open the album you play the first song first, and it's the first song, and the first song was Strange Brew. It's like I suddenly realized, wow, this is good.
Yeah,
these guys are good. Hey, I like this. This is cool.
And the drums, and it's in retrospect, the reason I like a lot of the bands. I'm following Chuck Biscuits. You were mentioning punk, and I like Chuck Biscuits. He plays Social Distortions and plays Suicidal Tendencies and is on Danzig. So I like Chuck Biscuits as a drummer. And a lot of these bands I like ends up being when you have a really good drummer where the percussion is highlighted and you got a good percussion track. And that's what Tool, the latest album on Tool, just does an amazing job of that as well. Just having a band with a drummer with the drummer as the lead, or that highlights the drumming, is super cool. And I didn't know about that Cream, and it took me a while to figure that out about Cream. So it's been fun digging into Ginger Baker. I think maybe this is question B, like what's our favorite song? I just want to make sure we kind of did an album review of Disraeli Gears. We talked about solo. We talked about Tool. I think my last question would be all right. So you don't it's a follow on to he doesn't like heavy metal. What is there a solo out there, like a non-jazz drum solo in modern day rock, that he would say that's some good stuff? That is what I would like to ask him. What who's that drummer out there today that is doing some drum solos, and you call it modern rock and roll? It's not it's not necessarily, it could be a jazz, I guess, but I would say, is there some modern rock and roll drummers out there that you would it's kind of a follow in my last question, I guess, but it was just like drum solo wise, what's your favorite drum solo besides yours? That wasn't part of it. Wasn't
understanding no one can reach your level.
That's not Phil.
Probably to preface that.
And you can't say Phil Seaman, Art Blakely.
Today.
Or Elvin Jones or Phil Max Roach. Yeah. You got to pick somebody now, and who's your favorite drum solo would be my question out to him. So that
it's a good question. I don't have any suggestions.
Yeah, I would just be interested in what
Struggling a
band,
little bit.
what rabbit hole could I go down that he would bring up. It would be fun to do. So that brings us to question 10, which is cool. Like Ginger Baker, if you don't check out this guy's bands, just outside of Cream, like listen to this. If you haven't heard Cream, check out this.
Yeah, definitely check out Cream. His early stuff, I wasn't that familiar with his early stuff.
Yeah,
and it's actually pretty good.
It's really good. It's just not popular.
Yeah,
You'll really like it. The Grand Bond Organization. Check it out.
Yeah.
There's some amazing tracks that are out there, that are good. If you stuck with us on the live podcast, thanks. If you joined us on later, thank you too. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. And yep, Steve,
up there.
Yep, up there. You gotta pull your finger. We got it the way we got it edited. You gotta pull your finger. Yep, that's fine.
It's over there. Okay,
Yeah,
all right, over there.
So yeah, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. If you got questions or comments, be sure to drop a comment in there. My question, I'll put this in the comments once YouTube edits it and stuff, is what's your favorite Ginger Baker song? You know, any band.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your favorite
bands.
Ginger Baker song?
Right.
So I'll end it there. Anything?
Wait, just one more thought before we sign off. Thank you for watching. And also, I mentioned that we're improvisers. We do comedy improv. And we have a regular show at the Big Canvas Comedy Theater in Omaha. It's on Farnham, about 36th and Farnham, 37th and Farnham. The 2nd and 4th Thursdays.
There we go. So,
at 8:30. So please come see us if you're in Omaha.
or if you're not in Omaha, fly in.
If you're
Come
not in
see
Omaha,
us.
come in. If we have that listener in South Africa, just fly in. It's worth the trip. It's a long flight. I'm not going to pretend. It's a long flight, but you'll enjoy the comedy. It's good.
It is good. And with that, make sure you hit subscribe so you know when we're playing next, and then we can give you updates on what we're doing both in the comedy world and on these podcasts.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.